Hi there. Many people start a ministry with excellent training, but what's missing is the training on how to fund the business. The study just will have the place that it will enable you to see how you can fund your ministry, as well as for those people who are already funding their ministry, maybe give some extra tips. Actually, we are looking at the following income sources in ministries. The first one is giving, tax, and so on. Second is grants. Third is sponsoring. Fourth is inheritance. Fifth is asset. Then other products and services. And lastly, debt. I will get into detail now on each of these parts. First of all, a bit on the legal fine print. Form an association. This is very important. So you always need to form an association in every country. In some countries like Spain, this is very complex and needs professional help. Well, in other countries, it's done online. In some countries, you have charities which only help other charities to set up charities. There are many different ways in each of the different countries. In some countries, be warned, you must have a separate uh, registration with the tax authorities. And the important thing is, general, if you have a ministry, on the forms, you should focus always on social aspects of your ministry. It's important that it's not a place to preach, so don't try to put your preaching in this. This will just make things much more complicated, specifically in legal terms. Then always keep finances separate from any personal account, and keep accounts, even if you fall under the threshold at first, just use a very cheap or normal booking software. It's always good, and you will later see that it will make life much easier. And then lastly, always important, create a simple one-pager website with a unique URL and email. This is always important. Again, something which a lot of you have just learned after many trial and errors. It is just like a point in place where you just have to have it. And then, before we now start in the funding itself, there are some important parts. Never curse anyone for not giving money. This is, of course, very important for you as Christian, but it is also good sound advice in general. The second is, money is not earned, nor is it given away on the fair base. Often it is given just because you ask. There are many charities which are not doing that well of a job in providing a unique perspective somehow, but they have massive funding because they ask a lot of people. So always get away from this thing that money is earned somehow in the funding. Then the next one is pray for all that hate you when your ministries gets higher income. There will always be those that see themselves as more deserving, and that is usually another ministry. So always pray for them, always forgive them. The next one is asking for money is boss work. Spending it falls in lower ranks. So when you see in the Bible where Paul asks virtually in every letter for money, while you see that lower ranking deacons are then managing the spending. The last one is asking for money is tough work, as you will need to leave your comfort zone and become an overcomer. Now the first one is giving and tax. In some countries, churches can levy a tax If that's possible, try it out. It's really, really convenient. Otherwise, you will have people who give your church money on a regular basis. Here, it is important that you establish something like standing orders, bank orders, so that people, when they go on holiday, they otherwise don't attend church, for example, or don't attend your ministry. You will otherwise have a dent in your financing at those times. General, it's always more important to look for regular income. The only part where this is different is if you are looking for donations for something like if you want to build a church or similar things. Otherwise, it is always important to go for a lower money, but on a regular basis, because this will sustain your ministry. The next one are grants. Grants from your mother ministry and grants from the government as well as from other associations like the lottery. Now, with the grants of mother ministries, it is often that a lot of ministers think that they will get a good grant for starting from, for example, their mother church or their mother ministry. This is usually not the case because the mother ministry or the mother church is actually investing in your training, and when they have done so, they think they have done their part. And if you get something, it usually is little to nothing, and then they even expect you to do all kinds of things for the mother ministry on top of that. It is usually a losing business. This comes for a shock to many people, especially when they start to get into earnest in full-time ministry. Then you can go to the government. The government give grants as well as some other associations like the lottery. I'm personally not inclined to take any money from the lottery, but this is such a thing that you need to decide yourself. It's often not easy to find grants. I can help, others can help, but always remember it is usually that other non-profits or other ministries are hiding them from you because there's of course always a limited amount, and then people have the tendency to exclude others. And if you go for grants, you always need to make sure it is hard. It's hard work. So you need usually to get a grant for, let's say, a limited time slot, 6 to 12 months. Then you need to fill out lots of paperwork during the grant. And then at the end, you need to make a presentation of what went good and how the money changed the life of other people. And if you can't convince people, you will never get a grant again in your life. So again, something good for those who are able to do grants, often more the quieter types, more the people who have problems speaking with people, but in the final presentations, they then also need to have a preacher on board who can then sell the vision and sell the whole thing as a success. Now, the next one and the biggest one is sponsoring. Now, in sponsoring, I have put certain categories here in. I've put sponsoring through meetings, calling on known people, calling on strangers to support your case, calling on multiplicators. Then I'm talking about co-sponsorship, crowdfunding, then about lottery and gambling. I will not talk about it, but a lot of charities work that way. Again, it is a thing which I can help you, but I personally have problems in actually taking money from gambling. And then the last one, which is online fundraising, and I will tell you why it's not effective. First of all, there are some parts how you present your ministry at sponsoring. The really hard part is when you present your ministry, you need 2 short sentences in 1 page and less than 25 seconds to present it. This is really important because after 25 to 27 seconds, depending on the person in front of you, the people are shutting down. This is the first impression, and if that doesn't work, you can lose it basically. The second one is never send letters. That's a waste of money. It worked until the mid-80s, and then people still do it nowadays. Old ministries still do it, but people have found out over the time that it actually is a waste. So I've done with huge non-profits, I have done certain studies, what is called controlling as an activity-based controlling. And there we have looked at how much the ministries are spending and how much is then coming in. And we have seen that newsletters or any letters which are sent are a waste of money and you are spending more than you earn, basically. Then prepare a second page, and then in the second page put in a sentence what you want. Like, for example, I like a tenth of a pastor, which is pastor salary and other costs of the pastor divided by 10. Again, this is something people can have concrete. So instead of saying I want, for example, 800 quid, instead of that, you're saying, I want a tenth of a pastor, that you sponsor a tenth of a pastor, or that you get me a product service, such, for example, like a minivan. So if you have to do some sponsoring by, for example, Ford, you ask them for a minivan, and they say, okay, we can do a free rental for you for 6 months or something like that. So this is something which is also important. When you go concrete, always say, do you need money, or is a product or service also an alternative? Then the last and most important thing, and this is really, really important, create a hook picture. This is something which I've taken out of sponsoring. Let some kids, for example, of your church or of your ministry, paint a picture with a man in front of a building that has the name of a potential sponsor on there, on the picture. And let the, just say, just a name you write on there, and then the kid can just put a man in front of it. And then go to those people who won't give you, for example, an appointment for where you can state your case. And it will be a very mean person who is not who will not take your call when you present him with a picture which a kid has been done to present your case here. So this is something which is often used in many charities and many ministries to overcome this resistance for presenting something somewhere. The first one I talk here about the sponsoring is through meetings. The sponsoring through meetings is effective with donors that have a high net worth, otherwise it can be a loss maker. Meetings will always have a dinner. This is important. And if you are not opposed against alcohol, put a bit on the table, because it increases giving by a large margin. So if you are opposed against alcohol, don't do it. But if alcohol is fine with your ministry, then put a bit of alcohol on the table, as it will really increase the giving. Then put up a sign with the 2 bullet points I mentioned beforehand. Do not otherwise mention the cause. Make a light, funny speech that makes donors feel well, as it also increases giving. Giving is increased usually by people who are just being told in 25 seconds what it's all about, but otherwise who have a wonderful evening. or a wonderful night. And this is something which really a lot of ministries are not making. They are always preaching and preaching of the cause, but they don't make the donors feel well. And for people of high net worth, it is important that you make them feel well. That is actually how money is given to charities. And specifically, political parties know how to do it very well. And they are making lots of money through this kind of meeting structure. Always state what you want, and here be concrete. So if you say, I want a minivan, say, I want a minivan or whatever, but don't put just up in saying as much money as possible. That's not good, because business people or people of high net worth, they usually want to give for a concrete thing. They want to give, for example, for a renovation. That's great. But if you, instead of a renovation, says, I want 20,000 US dollars, that's not something concrete. That's not something they are willing to invest in, actually. And then always have credit card terminals ready and PayPal. Make it easy to give. The most important thing is, which cripples a lot of ministries, is they make giving hard. You always need to make giving easy. Then sponsoring through calling on known prospects. Here is again, reiterate your ministry in under 25 seconds. Ask for specific donations like $20 monthly via bank transfer. And then tell them that this will finance a tenth of the heating bill, for example. Again, something concrete. It's important that they know what their money is doing. It's called the IKEA effect. By just doing something where you involve yourself, even if it's just mental, you feel good about it and you're likely to increase your donations. This is also why people are going back to IKEA stores, because they have built their own furniture, or at least they assembled the last stages. Then ask social questions after money matters is over. This is also important when you look at known prospects, because again, first concentrate on the money aspects and then go over to the small talk. It's important because often a lot of ministers, they try to start with the small talk, and then it is really awkward to get to the money. Instead of that, first take the money and then go to the other side. Then it's also important that you congratulate your donors on certain things, like, for example, anniversaries like the day of baptism or similar to that. When you call on strangers, which is often that you target business people, and the real important thing is you need to target local business people. And maybe a few large enterprises. Some enterprises, they have their own departments for giving, where they actually just make appointments and then you just put forward your case, and then they decide if they want to give something. But important is target your local business. Make an appointment via phone. And here again, use the picture hook to, if you can't get if you can't get in, or if you can't make an appointment. Then on the appointment, make it short and sweet. Important thing is present your ministry in less than 25 seconds. Ask specific donations, and then if they oppose them, say that is okay. If they oppose, just call again in 6 to 12 months. No big thing is lost there. And here, it's always important to create a new picture hook, regardless if they give you money or if they don't give you money. It is always something which keeps in their mind. If they have a picture in front of their company, so for example, if their company is Acme, and they have a picture of a man standing in front of Acme, they know that this was done by some kid in your ministry. And then if you call 6 months later, they are much more likely to give you a second chance then. Then the next one on sponsoring is calling on multiplicators. The multiplicator is an important part if you have a major undertaking, such as building a church or something similar. You actually look for a businessman who owns the raising of the money for this kind of thing. Usually business people loved such a role, but if you have problems, use the picture hook here again. It is important to make clear that the ownership will be with the ministry, because sometimes business people shoot a little bit over the top. But the multiplicator will actually run the sponsorship his way, and he may ask you for help from time to time. Make sure that you only put 1 point in there, so that you tell your multiplicator that if something goes in with interest-free loans or things like that, that he needs to discuss that with your ministry beforehand. Otherwise, it's a great way to finance a building such a church. If you don't do it yourself, it actually works on most ministries much better via multiplicators than by the head minister himself. Then we go over to co-sponsoring. Co-sponsoring is something where companies offer sponsoring when you pay someone else. Like, for example, on PayPal, you will always see that if you pay something via PayPal, they will always ask, do you want to sponsor this and this association, this charity, and so on. And this usually works great way to create good income. Again, here it is something that you need to look if that is okay for you as a way to raise money. Then think of collection boxes. The collection boxes where you had collection boxes in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s are having a real comeback right now. They are again placed at points of sales on supermarket, for example, and they are going through a great revival, and a lot of charities who are actually building on them are collecting a good amount of money. Again, always only think of staying local. Then connect with large car companies. They often offer cars rental free for charities. So for example, Ford sponsored this car for Acme ministry or something like that. So again, something which can save you a lot of money. Then ask your landlord to convert part of the rent in tax deductible giving. That often works by just pointing out that, for example, on your building, there will be a plaque saying, we thank the landlord for actually giving us lower rent and as a giving. Such a thing can be tremendously easy to do and can save you, again, a lot of outgoing money. Many social clubs, such as Rotary clubs, will also sponsor your ministry, and it is usually a good way to go to them and at least ask for the money in the same way as you would ask with unknown people. So here, use the same methods again and again. Another sponsoring which has become more and more important in recent years is the crowdfunding. Usually, you need to use multiple crowdfunding sites because people switch crowdfunding sites as they switch their underwear. It's amazing how quickly a crowdfunding site is becoming the state, and then after just a few days something else is coming up again, and then the original is coming back up again as the market leader. It's a coming and going there. Again, always remember here the IKEA effect. So always ask for something concrete instead of money. So let's say, for example, for the finances of the Sunday school kit as a target. That is something where people will give you much easier money than if you just ask for the money itself. Then, if possible, make little handmade gifts and offer them to top sponsors. So this could also be maybe a dinner yearly or something like that. Always stay local with these things and make these handmade gifts. They don't need to cost much, but it is the point that they are handmade from some people who are often less fortunate than the givers. And then be aware there are many services around crowdfunding. Only use those which cost no money. There are a lot of people who want to use you to make money in crowdfunding. There are lots of consultancies where you spend lots of money and then at the end it turns out to be a loss maker. So crowdfunding can work really well, but don't engage with consultants such as me in crowdfunding, because this is something where you can lose money very quickly. Then I'm coming to the online fundraising, and the online fundraising is again something which I want to tell you, it doesn't work. Online fundraising is a modern form for sending letters with the benefit of being cheaper. The problem is, just like with the letters, the donation letters, it stopped, and the online fundraising only worked when the internet was very new in the early 90s and then in the late 90s, and then it stopped very much at the end of the 90s as an effective tool. Again, something where you can spend a lot of money without earning anything. Again, a loss maker, stay away. Then we come away from the sponsoring into inheritance. Inheritance is a way that many large churches have made lots of money throughout the centuries. So, for example, the Roman Catholic Church has built its good fortune of today virtually on inheritance. So they have lots of buildings they inherit over the years, and then they keep them as assets, for example, and then they rent them out, and then they have a good stream of income over the all. Now, there are many people without kids today, and often they want to sponsor a charity if they die. They just often don't know if you would accept an inheritance. So just say here again, offers again for accepting inheritance should be done in a similar way as with blood donations, in a very non-threatening way. Important is often just that you mention that inheritance is something your ministry is looking for. That's often enough to do it. And here, don't help with testament making. Leave that to the donor. It's very important that you don't pressure here, because otherwise you get very quickly in legal matters which can destroy your ministry. So, for example, contested wills. Always keep out of this, because contested wills, I have seen, often can destroy a ministry in a couple of days. And then do not make public more here on inheritance than is required by law. Anything which you make too much public about inheritance is something which will bite you afterwards. Then ministries are often getting income via assets. So it's a common income, but usually more by established ministries than by new ministries. Usually it is a property in case of a ministry, but you always need to also think that cash can create additional cash. So if you don't, so it's often important that you have a bit cash on side. Many ministries always spend everything straight away. Maybe that's in your theology, but again, just think about it. Shares are best to avoid it, that they block other donations. Churches which have invested in shares usually don't get any donations whatsoever. Fixed incomes are often used as they provide a stable reporting and prediction. And it is important here, don't be afraid of owning assets as a ministry, but don't speak of this. Just look at Jeremiah 9, verse 23 and 24. That's quite an important part, which has really helped me with owning assets as a ministry. Then, if you have products or services, offer them by all means. Again, it is seen as something good by the community that if you offer a product or services, as you are encouraging the creation of value. Selling should be done on a personal level only. It should not be sold as a commodity. Always connected to a story, because everyone loves a good story, and never try to sell a product or service of a charity without a story. Always attach the story to it. The story will see that your product or services are sold by about 300 to 400% more in terms of money. Products best sold in nature, make example of clay or things like that, something which people relate as not too professional. Services, for example, as a car wash by the youth club and polish, can also be related on a personal level. Always point out that the purchase was special, as we always love to hear that something was special. That way, you usually can make much more money than the products and services when they are sold as assets or commodities will generate. Another part is debt. Debt is usually a bad form of financing. See Romans 13:8. Usually it's always good when you're buying a property, so a mortgage. Make sure that the ministry is not just about serving the interest and the repayment. This happens quite often with ministries, and that is often the death spiral of ministries. Debt quickly delivers great result, but is very limited in the middle to long term. So stay away from debt, even if it makes much easier in the short run. Try to find sponsors for interest-free, low interest loans. This is something which you should really invest in, even if you make a mortgage. Often, mortgage companies have a special deal on charities where they take the interest away. And never finance anything by debt alone. That's also something which is more or less common practice. So please let me know any comments or something where I can help in short terms. I am, of course, not there to help you in actually raising the funds myself, because this would really go against my time, because again, I work as a consultant myself, so I have to make an income for my family as well. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye bye.